Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that no matter how hard you work, you can never escape debt. Your taxes increase every year, your money buys less every month, and quitting your job is illegal. Leaving your town is illegal. Even inheriting your father's profession is mandatory. Now imagine this system controls the most powerful empire on earth. That is exactly how the Roman Empire didn't just fall, it was slowly taxed to death. Most people think Rome collapsed because of barbarian invasions, corrupt emperors, or moral decay. Those things mattered, but they were symptoms. The real disease was a single tax system that quietly strangled the empire from the inside. A tax so heavy, so rigid, that it destroyed productivity, killed motivation, and turned free citizens into trapped subjects. And once this tax took hold, Rome never recovered. To understand this, we need to go back to the late 3rd century, when the Roman Empire was already bleeding. Civil wars had drained the treasury. Armies were growing larger and more expensive, borders stretched thousands of miles, and emperors needed money immediately, not promises. For centuries, Rome relied on relatively flexible taxation. Landowners paid based on harvests, cities negotiated obligations. Taxes were annoying, but survivable. That balance ended when the empire faced total financial collapse. Enter Emperor Diocletian. Diocletian didn't want a temporary fix. He wanted control, absolute control, and he believed the empire could only survive if taxation became predictable, unavoidable, and permanent. So Rome introduced what became the most destructive tax system in its history. It was called the capitatio jugatio. This wasn't just a tax, it was a financial cage. Under this system, every piece of land was measured, classified, and taxed at a fixed rate, regardless of whether crops failed or succeeded. Every person was counted, categorized, and taxed based on their social role. Farmers, laborers, artisans, everyone had a number, everyone had a price. And here's the critical part. If you couldn't pay, the state didn't care why. Drought? Too bad. Invasion destroyed your farm? Irrelevant. Disease killed your workers? Not Rome's problem. The tax bill never changed. Suddenly, farmers were taxed on land that produced nothing. Villages owed money even after being burned. Entire communities were punished for circumstances they couldn't control. So what did people do? They ran. They abandoned their land, their homes, their cities. And Rome responded with force. To stop tax flight, the empire made leaving illegal. Farmers were bound to their land. Sons were bound to their father's profession. Bakers could not stop baking. Soldiers' children had to become soldiers. Mobility vanished. Rome had accidentally reinvented serfdom. This tax didn't just collect money, it erased freedom. As productivity collapsed, the government demanded even more taxes to compensate. That pressure crushed the middle class first. Small landowners sold themselves into dependency under wealthy elites just to survive. This is how the Roman middle class disappeared. And while taxes increased, Rome made another fatal decision. It destroyed its own money. To pay soldiers and officials, emperors began debasing the currency. Silver coins were diluted with cheap metals. At first, no one noticed. Then, prices exploded. Inflation ripped through the empire. Now, imagine paying fixed taxes in a currency that loses value every year, while your tax bill stays the same or rises. That is financial suffocation. People stopped trusting money. Trade slowed. Markets shrank. Barter returned. The economy froze. Rome had created a system where working harder didn't help, producing more didn't save you, innovation didn't matter. Survival meant hiding, cheating, or surrendering independence. Tax collectors became feared figures, backed by soldiers. Entire towns fled before census officials arrived. Some landowners deliberately reduced production so they wouldn't attract attention. Think about that. An empire where success became dangerous. Over time, the state grew more desperate. More laws, more penalties, more force. But the harder Rome squeezed, the less it collected. By the 4th and 5th centuries, the empire was hollow. It still looked powerful on maps. It still had emperors and armies. But the economic engine was dead. So when barbarian invasions came, Rome didn't fall with a bang. It collapsed quietly. Cities couldn't fund defenses. Armies weren't paid reliably. Local elites stopped supporting the state. Many provinces didn't resist invaders at all because Roman taxation had already ruined them. For many people, Roman rule was worse than foreign rule. That is the ultimate failure of taxation. Not when people complain, but when they stop caring who governs them. This wasn't just a Roman story. It's a warning written in economic blood. When a tax system becomes disconnected from reality, when it punishes productivity, when it traps people instead of empowering them. Collapse is no longer a question of if, only when. Empires don't die from invasion first. They die when their citizens lose the incentive to build, work, and contribute. Rome taxed stability into rigidity, control into paralysis, security into suffocation. And the empire paid the price over generations. If this kind of silent collapse fascinates you, this is exactly what this channel exists to explore. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes in very uncomfortable ways. If you want more stories about how powerful systems fall quietly before they fall publicly, subscribe to Silent Collapse. Not for entertainment, for awareness. Because the most dangerous collapses are the ones that happen slowly, legally, and right in front of everyone. And Rome proved that better than anyone. What makes Rome's collapse even more disturbing is that the system didn't fail suddenly. It worked exactly as designed. That's the part history books often ignore. The Roman government believed stability mattered more than growth. Predictability mattered more than freedom. So they locked the economy in place and called it order. But economies are living systems. When you freeze them, they don't stay stable. They rot. By the 5th century, entire regions of the empire were technically Roman, but practically abandoned. Roads weren't maintained. Aqueducts broke down. Tax records still existed, but the people listed on them were gone. The state was collecting taxes from ghosts, and yet the tax demands never stopped. Officials were promoted not for improving prosperity, but for extracting more from less. That created a culture where survival depended on squeezing the remaining productive people even harder. This created a brutal feedback loop. High taxes reduced production. Reduced production forced higher taxes. Higher taxes caused more people to flee or hide, and every cycle made the empire weaker. Rome didn't collapse because it lacked laws. It collapsed because it had too many. At some point, the empire crossed an invisible line. Citizens stopped seeing the state as protection and started seeing it as a threat. Loyalty evaporated. When Germanic tribes entered Roman territory, many locals didn't resist. Some even helped them. Not because the invaders were better, but because Roman taxation had already taken everything. That's when you know an empire is finished, when people no longer fear its enemies more than they fear their own government. By the time the Western Roman Empire officially fell, the collapse had already happened economically. The political event was just paperwork. Rome is often remembered for its armies, architecture, and emperors, but its real legacy is a lesson most modern societies still struggle to accept. You cannot tax a civilization into obedience and expect it to remain strong. Strength comes from participation, not compulsion. This channel exists to uncover these quiet patterns. Not the dramatic endings, but the slow decisions that make collapse inevitable long before anyone notices. If you're watching this, you're already ahead of most people. You're paying attention to how systems fail before they break, and that awareness matters. If you want to continue exploring these silent failures, you know where to find us. This is Silent Collapse.